everybody. I am Anjanette, and welcome to this week's session of Healing from the Inside Out. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Victoria Sanchez, and she's a lot of different people rolled into one. So, she is a trauma reversal specialist. She helps people really find joy and peace in their life after grief. She is an author, and she's suffered some traumas herself. On our last call, we dove a little into that. She's had some dental reconstruction because of problems she had there. But that's just talk for another show. We're going to get into that in another show, definitely, because that's, oh my God, you need to hear that. But please help me welcome our guest, Victoria, and we'll hear from her what she actually does. So, Victoria Sanchez, tell me all about yourself.
Oh, I have had a beautiful but long and adventurous journey in my life. I have went through trauma, compound trauma, complex trauma, childhood trauma, and I guess when I was growing up, I never knew that I was in a traumatic situation. I was brought up in an era when you're to be seen and not heard. You're supposed to just do as you say, not as I do, kind of thing.
I've heard those expressions many times myself.
And so you lose your boundaries, right? You, as a child growing up, you're just, you're trying to please everyone. You're learning about yourself at different ages. And when you're told that continually, I feel like it creates a self-sabotage in you, um, where you beat yourself up and you become your self-talk is more critical because those are the words that you hear around you. And so getting through that, I suffered through my aunt who was murdered when I was 12 years old by a serial killer, and learning about cannibalism, rape, incest after death. Um, Learning about all this at 12 years old, it was very challenging. I couldn't talk to people about this. Um, then having my aunt's body brought home and left in our home and not being able to clear out that energy or understand what really happened other than hearing the adults talk about it. But I wasn't able to get in on that conversation so that I could learn how to heal. And there was no therapy, there was no counselors, there was no nothing like that. It was just deal with it. Um, so that was a really big trauma in my life when I was young. Put me in a realm where I became an adult very young. And so then my social skills fell way behind with people of my age because I would go to school and talk about things that other kids had never heard about, trying to get clarification, trying to figure out who I was. And kids didn't accept that. They didn't understand it. What's murder? What's cannibalism? What are you talking about? And so it made me only talk to adults. That's where I was comfortable. And then being a horse rider growing up and breeder, I was so fortunate to have my beautiful animals. They were there for me all the time. But I learned how to communicate with animals. That was my outlet. I rode my horses every day. Pretty much, if it wasn't school, I was on them all the time, training them. We would breed them. We would show them, go out on the road, and make them the superstars they were. But I was at such a high level of thinking because I had so many responsibilities as a kid. I think I lost my own identity as a child because I could only communicate to adults. My ability to communicate with peers my age was it was overwhelming for them. And so I quickly learned to gravitate toward adults. And then going all fast forward to all the way to my adult life now, I'm learning that again. I suffered my own death experience in 2019, came back, and again, I'm talking about all these things to people. I died, I came back, I saw God, I saw the other side. People don't understand you.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
Now,
it's new. when I think that when people haven't experienced something, they don't know how to react really because it's new to them.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, learning the communication style, learning about who I am, my new identity, trying to figure out that identity as a kid. I guess I never really had an identity. And now I'm stepping into a realm where I did have a death experience and I do know where I'm supposed to be in my life. And then I lost my son a year later. So I had all that trauma. So just when I started thinking that I was getting my grounding and I was coming into myself, then I'm a whole new person again. How do I live without my son? What does it even mean for him to be gone? Like, how do I exist without my own DNA present in this world anymore? Like, he was part of my DNA. And then I learned about the integration process through yoga and Tai Chi and Eastern philosophy. And I learned how your child can come back into you, can their DNA scientifically proven as well as spiritually, but their DNA part of it comes back into the mom. It lights us up. It helps our neural pathways in our brain come alive. It helps to light our heart up if we can tap into that. And so now my new identity is that I learned how to integrate my son into my body, into my mind, and into my spirit. And it keeps me going forward. And I want to help other mothers and educate them so that they can learn too that no matter the grief and trauma that they go through, they don't have to stay stuck. They can move forward. They can integrate their children into their own DNA, and they can create a beautiful journey, a legacy for their children. And that's how my book came to be. It was a healing process for me, learning NLP, a new language style, because of the trauma I had in my mouth. I couldn't communicate. So communication was so important. So when I was going through all this and learning in the past few years since my son and I died, I learned NLP and communication, and I learned resonance and hypnosis and about narcissism. And there's just so many modalities, yoga, and I've educated myself and brought myself to a place now that I do know my new identity. I'm working toward that every day. And I want to help other moms see that they can, while they're healing, write down what they're doing in a book and save each of those things, save their journals, put them in a book so that they have a legacy for their children, for themselves, and it helps them to move forward. So I like to really work with moms. I work with people that are going through anticipatory grief. Maybe they know they're going to lose someone. And so I help them to process through that, think about what they're going to do without their family member there and reenact or act it out in their mind, envision it, see how they can make something beautiful. Because I didn't know my son was going to die. So I wasn't prepared. So it was very shocking to me, causing PTSD. But with people that are going through anticipatory grief and they can see that their loved one's going to die, that I can help them with so that the transition is much more peaceful for them and their loved ones that are passing over. Now I want to work
I
with,
don't know if peaceful is a good word. I don't think that you can ever anticipate how you're going to feel about death until it actually happens.
well,
Anticipatory guidance or not, it's there's nothing that really prepares you for death until it happens, especially with a loved one.
yeah, but a
So,
peacefulness inside of you, like that you can tolerate it. Your nervous system isn't going haywire, that you can move forward. You have a vision to move forward.
so it's interesting that a book came out of all of this. What is the name of your book?
Superhuman healing frequencies.
Okay, that's different. That's a mouthful. So, and this was a collection of journals, and you just said, I'm going to write this." Did you? seek people out for help when you decided to write the book, or you just said, I'm going to do this?
So I would journal, I would meditate every day, calming my nervous system down, doing certain mantras and different modalities I learned. And then I would journal and I would write down what it was I was learning. If it was NLP, then I wrote like the science of NLP in the book, how it affects you. If it was like the five senses and the five elements, if it's time to do self-care, the different things to do for yourself for self-care, like doing rituals under the full moon, baths under the full moon, taking salt baths with Epsom salts, and I have like different recipes. But when like the full moon can move the tides of the ocean, they also move the water within our DNA because we're over 70% water. So when you have full moons or new moons, it can activate the water molecules in our body and cause us to either be really heightened in our senses or go in a real lull. So these modalities that I have, like taking a bath under the full moon, praying, going out, putting your feet in the dirt, moon bathing, sunbathing, just all these different things that I was doing, I was writing those things down. So it's how to integrate your five senses and the five elements so that you can have peace and harmony in your life.
I think that's going to help a lot of people. I don't know too many people that aren't looking for more peace and more harmony in their life. So you had mentioned something before that kind of got my eyebrows up. And I was like, what? Because I didn't remember this coming out when we talked. You mentioned something about cannibalism,
Mhm.
that you suffered through that. So, um, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I think any listener is saying cannibalism. Did she just say that? So
Yeah.
what did you mean to that, like experiencing that trauma?
Okay, so first I want to let everybody know that if they cannot hear something like this, they may want to step away. Just a little disclaimer. When I was 11, I believe, 10 or 11, a man by the name of Edward Carroll Cole, he was a serial murderer and he married my aunt. We didn't know he was a serial murderer. There's a book and a documentary on him. Um, he had been killing since he was 10 years old and had gotten away with it. He was very smart. And so, how it happened was he would meet women in bars usually, and then he would take them out behind the dumpsters or get a hotel, and he would kill them, and then he would eat them, and he would rape them. My aunt was one that had probably the most severe case of this because they were married, but she was in California, in San Diego, California, and he killed her and
He
he
killed
put
your aunt?
my aunt.
Okay, so when you're saying that you were exposed to cannibalism, but I thought I heard you say you brought her home. So he didn't eat her, did he?
He did. We brought her ashes home.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just trying to draw a picture for the audience, right? So, um, how did you find out that this was going on?
Well, he killed her in San Diego and put her in the closet, and it's very hot there and humid, and he covered her with blankets. And my grandmother, who lived in San Diego as well, she hadn't heard from my aunt for a couple days. And so she called my mom and asked if she had heard from her, and she hadn't heard anything. So then my grandmother went to the house, to my aunt's house, and tried to get up on the window, but she was so tiny she couldn't see in. And so she knocked, but nobody answered. So she called my mom back again here in New Mexico and asked if she had heard from her, and no. So they were getting concerned. Finally, I guess my grandmother had talked to Ed Cole and asked where she was something to the effect, I was little, I don't remember exactly, but something to the effect of, she's not here, we're fighting, or she went somewhere or something. And so it bought him more time. Then 2 weeks had went by, and my grandmother called the police, and they went in and they found her in the closet. And I guess he was pulling her out daily, every other day, and having sex with her and cutting pieces of her skin off, cooking them and eating them. And
That's so morbid on so many levels.
yeah,
So
yeah,
my concern is for that child, you be at that time being exposed to this and being the fly on the wall, having to listen to this.
yeah, it was horrifying, just horrifying. I lived on a farm, we had horses, so I had experienced death. I knew what it was for an animal to die and sit with them, and I watched them get taken away. And, that's kind of morbid too when that happens, because they have to be pretty aggressive. Horses are pretty heavy. So I had an exposure to that, but not from my aunt, not from a human. And to hear, like, our horses, when they would, if one of them died, they we loved them still. We prayed over them, we laid with them, we hugged them, until they got taken away. We didn't leave them. But to hear how horrible my aunt was left at a little girl's age, and there was no filter in our house, just whatever phone call was going on, I heard it all. And just listening to the gruesomeness, and then hearing how this man was just on the loose and he was killing other women across the country. They finally caught him in Dallas and put him in prison, and he died there. But 20 some women he killed across the world, across America, I think, before he actually got put in prison. And just hearing all this stuff and having to deal with this and not having an outlet, but having to go to school and try to talk to other kids, like it made me a social outcast, I felt. Yet everybody that I talk to says, you always look like you had it together. You always look like you were so confident. We thought you'd be the first woman president. You always, were so together. But inside, I was so confused. I was like,
But the
how?
kids that you were trying to explain this to were probably traumatized by the very thought of something like this happening because their little bodies didn't know how to handle it either. So
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about going forward because you're recreating yourself again, right? And you're out there helping women, right? And you have all these a lot of different modalities in which you can really help them with, but you're really concerned with helping the women with the grief process. So why did you choose that? So I mean, usually it's a part of our own story, I mean, but you have so many different components of your story that you really could have chose anything. Why did you choose grief to help with?
because through my grief journey, I was completely left alone, completely left alone. I had nobody here to hug me. I mean, even my dog died last year. I literally have nobody, and I suffered so much through this, the loneliness, you know, I'm all alone. And a lot of people couldn't have dealt with it. I know a lot of mothers who have, taken their own lives because it's too much for them. But I couldn't do that. I knew that I had to tell my story for my son. I knew my son died. I can't check out. But how do I move forward? I'm so lonely. I need an oxytocin boost from a hug, and I couldn't get that. So I learned to hug myself. YouTube University. I got on YouTube,
I
TED
love
Talk.
it.
you know and then I got into all these other universities and academies, and just learned that hugging yourself, being in touch with yourself and loving yourself and feeding yourself a good meal and giving yourself alkaline water. And I was so by myself that I got to study myself from the inside out. And now I know how it feels to be so lonely and each stage of it. And my mission was just like, I will never let another woman suffer through this and not know that there's someone that will reach out to her and tell her she's loved. And if she needs a hug and I'm 3,000 miles away, I'll teach her how to hug herself through the computer because that's how I learned.
That's
And
a
it,
beautiful, beautiful thing. So we are going to have another show. We are going to talk about your book. We are going to talk about your dental surgery and stuff like that. But people want to know, there's a lot of people out there. I mean, there's no shortage of grief in this world. How would they reach out to you if they wanted to get in touch with you and work with you or get to know you and maybe even about writing journaling and writing the book? How would they go about doing that?
www.ridewithvictoria.com.
Ride with Victoria, RIDE.
Uh-huh. And the
Okay.
reason I chose that is because I'm all over the internet under hashtag One Mom's Memorial Ride, but I started riding my ATV over 10,000 miles because I was alone all the time and I just wanted to go be in isolation, but I needed to move. So and I couldn't walk. I was just so, so in pain, but my ATV would get me there. And so I started riding around the sacred hill, and I've taken people on this ride with me, and they love it. And so that's where the Ride with Victoria is. Ride with Victoria on One Mom's Memorial Ride.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you for coming in today and sharing your story. Do you have any words of wisdom, final words that you'd like to leave the guests with about how you would replace that piece of your story for them? Like what they could do when they're experiencing something like this, like their first step in the grief process?
Yeah. Hold strong to your faith, never give up, and never surrender. Educate yourself, get on some TED Talks, go in some groups where there's other people that are grieving. Um, self-care, self-care, love yourself because there's nobody else going to take care of you the way you need through this kind of grief. So hug yourself, look in the mirror, give yourself the Mel Robbins high five. Yourself, take time for yourself, but never give up and never surrender. Hold strong to your faith.
That's beautiful. Guys, we're going to leave it at that tonight. Thank you so much for joining myself and Victoria today. I know you're going to love her as much as I did. And we'll be back with Victoria because she's got so much going on that I want you to know about. So have a great night, guys.